I'm admittedly a recovering Paul Thomas Anderson fanboy. Was not a huge fan of Inherent Vice, but I love most everything that he does, and I feel not without good reason. So let's get 5 minutes up on the board and talk Licorice Pizza. Licorice Pizza follows Alana Kane and Gary Valentine as they grow up, run around, and fall in love in California's San Fernando Valley in the 1970s. Paul Thomas Anderson, for me at least, is top 5 directors currently working right now. The reason I respond to his stories is because they're about people with unbridled and very aggressive ambitions. And a lot of filmmakers, a lot of indie filmmakers that kind of follow in his style focus on the depravity and the drama and the terror that can come from that type of personality. He also recognizes the fun that can come from that type of personality, even though it's a destructive type of chaos. And he balances both of those very, very well in most everything that he does. Some movies have more than others. This movie is no different, but this is much more like Boogie Nights was. It feels like almost an effortless level of fun. And by fun, I do not mean that it's light in terms of the storytelling. It feels like there is a ton of substance beneath every single one of these decisions, every single one of these characters, and it's executed absolutely beautifully. It feels a lot like, and I've mentioned this a few times on the channel, Martin Scorsese once said that there are movies that succeed a lot in being focused on story and not really being focused on plot. Paul Thomas Anderson does this constantly. In fact, Harmony Korine once said about his movies, and I hate his movies, he made a comment that he wants to make movies that feel like they flow like water instead of flowing the way that a novel does, and I don't think he's ever done that. But Paul Thomas Anderson actually does. His movies do not go from point A, B, C, D, E, on and on until you reach the end of the plot and the goal is achieved. It's much more about a well-defined set of characters living in a very well-defined world, and then he just follows them through these set pieces, and we see them grow along the way. There are obviously goals that each character has, but they're much more ethereal, and while watching them, it takes a few times of revisiting them to really see the way that the characters are changing. The first few times, you can tell that his characters are changing, the story's changing, but it's not until you really go back that you see the journey that each character's gone on. And again, it's how effortlessly his characters go on these journeys and how entertaining it is. His movies, I think that's why they feel very episodic, but I feel like that's also why they work in the end, a lot like the way Robert Altman's movies were. Even the more that he works with this type of style, really ever since The Master, his movies come across, I think, a lot more like you are viewing someone's memories than you are just watching a story play out on screen. But every character in his movies and every character in this movie feels like they were absolutely destined to be there. Of course, that's with the main players, but the bit parts that come up, the people, the person that's on screen for 5 seconds just kind of with a bit line, or just a person that's an extra, the set of extras in the background, it feels like everything is being orchestrated in tandem with one another and that nothing that's going on is by accident. Paul Thomas Anderson's movies are always a shelf above, I think, most other people's that are working. The scene that took this movie there for me was whenever Alana goes to meet the mayor. The amount of storytelling that is done in this one scene, the amount of emotional information that we're given, not through exposition, but just through conversation, through push-ins, through long close-ups for a held glance. There's so much storytelling just in that one scene, but the scene comes across incredibly entertaining. It's heartbreaking in a lot of ways, and I think that's the best example of what Paul Thomas Anderson succeeds in doing, and he does that same thing throughout this entire movie. It's been a while since it feels like he's made a movie that feels like this much fun. This feels a lot more like a coming-of-age movie. It's got that unbridled ambition that most of his characters have, but this is much more like a young feeling. You're excited about life. You're just kind of rolling with the punches that life throws at you. And this movie actually reminded me a lot of the Orson Welles movie that came out on Netflix, The Other Side of the Wind. The kind of excitement of being able to create and the fluidity that comes from that, characters feeling like they don't really care, but they know that if they're just going to push forward and they're going to succeed in some way, even if that just means having a great time. This has that feeling throughout the whole thing, and that's part of why it feels like it's effortlessly fun. So let me know your thoughts on this. Where do you rank this in your favorite Paul Thomas Anderson movies? Be sure to leave a comment below and also subscribe to 5 Minute Critic for future updates on reviews and movie news.